It's a special moment for us in our campus to host him for a number of reasons. His own extraordinary journey and life, his deep and pervasive and long, developed friendship and fascination for India, even before he came as ambassador here, his deep commitment to values of democracy and pluralism and things that we value in this country, all of that makes him a very special person. So I'm particularly delighted that he's here. I also have a very special connection with him. I was also a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and although our lives didn't overlap there, but I could imagine the kind of experiences he would have had being at Oxford. What I thought I will do is that for the benefit of the ambassador, but also for some of his own colleagues who are present here, very briefly, I want to tell the JGU story, although the students, some of them may or may not be aware of the story, but it's important that this moment we share this quick story. This university owes significantly to a number of American educationists as well as American educators and education institutions for not only inspiring me, but also many others to be part of this endeavor. I have, some of you might know that the details of this university essentially, had its origin to the basement of the NYU Law Library, where I had the privilege to meet an amazing man named Peter Schuck, who is a professor at Yale, but also taught at NYU. I met a number of individuals, including John Sexton, Philip Paulston, Norman Dawson, and so many others who really very generously believed in the idea of something that I was sharing with them and supported us all through. So the story is that with that, those experiences of being a student at Oxford and Harvard, later a lawyer in New York, I went around the world, including teaching in Japan and Hong Kong, and got to meet with this Indian benefactor by name Naveen Jindal in the year 2006, spent 1 year persuading him to do three things. One, to make a substantial financial commitment. Second, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university in India. Mr. Jindal himself was educated in an American university. He studied at the University of Texas, Dallas. Many years later, that institution, which used to be called as University of Texas, Dallas School of Management, is now known as the Naveen Jindal School of Management at the University of Texas, Dallas, where he endowed. His own experience of being in an American institution also shaped the thought process and his own commitment to philanthropy as well as education. With that commitment, I moved to India from Hong Kong, and that was late 2007. And early 2008 onwards, we began the process of institution building. January to April 2008, I was trying to understand India myself as I was returning to India after a decade of living abroad. And quickly I realized what an extraordinary journey that was about to unravel. From April 2008 onwards, we began the process of institution building, land acquisition, formulation of curriculum, course structure, program development, faculty recruitment plan, student admissions process, hiring of architects, construction engineers, contractors, and persuading the government of Haryana to pass a new law to establish the first private university in the state of Haryana. During that time, and again, extraordinary efforts were made building connections with American institutions. And for all the students who are present here, and this what I'm about to tell you, is the reason why the India-US relationship is going to be very special. Just imagine literally in January 2008, and I'm here in India, and we are building this university. Nothing was here. Land acquisition process was about to happen, and guess what? We had letters from Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Cornell, Michigan, and a few more American institutions from their leadership saying that they will build international collaborations with this non-existent university. I had an international board of advisors which had Anne-Marie Slaughter and 20 other American professors who were there, part of this non-existent university, believing in the idea and vision. So we owe a debt of intellectual gratitude to American institutions, American higher education leaders, for believing and trusting in the idea of this institution long before the world discovered us. So this is all where it began. 2008, we are right here. This side of the screen is where we are located. This block was just right there. Nothing was here and we were creating something from nothing. We were creating everything from nothing. That journey that began in a very modest manner in early 2009, in the process of construction of campus, we literally began that process, and this was around late 2008, and on as late as 27th January 2009, the government of Haryana passed the legislation to establish the first private university, and soon after, I was appointed the first Vice-Chancellor, and that's our journey. We began with a little over 100 students in the year 2009, and we have over 12,000 students today. They were all from India then, and today we have students from over 75 countries. The faculty members and staff were 20 at that time, all from India, and today we have nearly 4,000 faculty members and staff from over 50 countries, and of course all states and union territories of India. The land area at that time was 49 acres, and now we have over 102 acres, and we built 100,000 square feet of built-up space, and now we have over 4 million square feet of built-up space. That's the story of establishment and expansion. We have 12 different schools and 4 institutes: law, business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, architecture, banking and finance, environment and sustainability, psychology and counseling, languages and literature, public health and human development are the 12 schools. We have 4 institutes, all of which is advancing the academic agenda of the university. Internationalization and international collaborations is our DNA. We have partnerships with over 430 universities spread across 70 countries. But I'm happy to report that out of these 400 plus universities, over 75 of them are American universities, constituting the largest country in terms of all our international collaborations, and clearly the most aspirational destination for our students. Our faculty members and staff, of course, come from all these countries which are mentioned there. We are a very interdisciplinary institution, something that I was mentioning to Ambassador Garcetti. We drew a lot of inspiration from the American liberal arts education. We feel that knowledge cannot be compartmentalized in the disciplines that we have. The new national education policy has envisaged that, but we did that long before the NEP. And so our schools and programs are structured by the fact that students have opportunities to take courses in the other schools and programs that are there. Our research and publications are part of the central vision of our university. We have 60 plus centers which are advancing the research agenda. Our faculty members are publishing, and over 200 books are part of the publishing record. We have an amazing citation record which has actually influenced our rankings. Our faculty members are also engaged in several research grants from leading organizations both in India and abroad. This journey that began in the year 2009, and this year is very special. We'll be celebrating our 15th anniversary. We are now consistently ranked as India's first-ranked private university. Our law school is ranked #1 in both public and private. But most importantly, we have been declared as an institution of eminence by the Government of India. As some of you know, the Honorable Prime Minister of India made a major public policy announcement 5 years ago with a view to identifying 10 public and 10 private universities and give them the status of an institution of eminence. That process, which included 1,000 plus universities and 50,000 colleges and 5,000 plus business schools and nearly 2,000 law schools, culminated in the selection of 8 public universities and 4 private universities, which have been given the status of an institution of eminence. We are clearly among the youngest, but most importantly, the only non-STEM, non-medicine university which has been given the status of an institution of eminence. In conclusion, I want to say that we have a future ahead of us. We are looking at what we should be doing in the future. We are looking at the expansion possibilities as we look at how we should be positioning ourselves by 2034 when we'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary. We have plans and we are dreaming, and these are part of our dreams. We hope to establish a school of engineering and technology, a school of artificial intelligence and robotics, a school of data sciences, a school of natural sciences, a school of biotechnology and biomolecular sciences, potentially a school of medicine, a school of dentistry, a school of nursing, and of course a school of physiotherapy and other allied health sciences. The vision is to be able to build a comprehensive university that can fulfill the needs and aspirations of not just people from India, but also around the world. I do want to say that as we look at the future, we will be expanding our current land, but also buildings, our programs, our schools, our faculty, our staff, and all of that. As we celebrate our 25th anniversary, we hope to achieve all these important milestones. And I know for sure that this journey that we are planning to cover, all of you, and of course our 10,000 plus alumni will also be part of it. I want to end by saying that for all the young people who are present here in this room, as you can imagine, this is a very critical moment for India, but also the world. It is also a time when one can feel, one can have hope or despair, because the world is going through a number of challenges. But one of the reasons that gives me a lot of hope about the future is that while we have become a country of 1.5 billion people and have become the world's largest populated country, the most important part of India is the 1 billion people who are less than 35 years of age. Ambassador Garcetti, as much as he looks very young, he is not less than 35. I am not less than 35, but all of you are. The students of this university, like universities around the world and in India, you are less than 35 years of age. At the dawn of Indian independence, our life expectancy was 32. The United Nations has estimated, and now it is 72, but the UN has estimated that by 2100, our life expectancy will be 82. That means when most parts of the Western world will become older, when most parts of Eastern world, including China and Japan, will become older, India will be younger and will be younger for a longer time. Young Indians, like you, will be shaping the future of India and the future of the world. And that possibility of shaping the future of India and the future of the world means to be able to be connected to the world and to be able to have high-quality education that can be transformative and will also help you make the kind of impact. In many ways, I just want to say that we have a responsibility to connect with the world and to address the big problems of our time. Education and also understanding the complexity in the world in which we live requires a deeper engagement with the world. Nuanced understanding of complexity is something that we need to cultivate within our universities, and no country, no university is free of the challenges that comes with addressing complex issues. So I want to say that make this opportunity that you have as the best of the opportunities you can, and be a change agent and be a leader. In that process, I hope you will discover the United States of America, which inspired so many of us, as it was not only an open society, a welcoming society, but also many Americans believed in the idea of this institution and continue to support this institution beyond the call of duty, and were able to promote it in ways that very few in other parts of the world, including in India, have done. So I want to end by my short reflections to say that it's a very special moment for us to welcome Ambassador Eric Garcetti to India, but also to OP Jindal Global University. Thank you for your time and indeed your presence.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. And now I leave the floor to Professor Dr. Sriram Cholia, Dean of Jindal School of International Affairs and Director General of Jindal India Institute.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Welcome, Ambassador Garcetti. It's such an honor for us, especially for the students of the School of International Affairs. It's a real treat. As you know, there are very few private universities in India with strong schools of international affairs, and ours is one of them. We have 700 students and 60 faculty studying all aspects of international politics and global economy and related subjects. So they've been waiting for your visit and for your talk. I won't stand between you and them, but want to just mention a couple of things. We were just hearing Ambassador Garcetti in a private gathering with the deans, and he said we are now somewhere midway up the mountain in the US-India relationship, meaning that the peak is ahead. And, you know, I'm just writing my 6th book, my new book called Friends, India's Closest Strategic Partners. And I've got a full chapter on US-India Global Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. And I've quoted our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who says something similar. He says, you ain't seen anything yet in the US-India partnership. So effectively, they're both echoing the same sentiment that the best days of this relationship lie ahead. And because we are so close, we are also often very critical of each other. And, it's only the intimacy that brings out more complexity sometimes. And sometimes feels like, we are at loggerheads. But if you look down there, the objective realities, the economic partnership, the defense partnership, the third country cooperation. Students, if you're interested in what's happening in the Indo-Pacific and what we are doing together, just look at what Adani is doing in Sri Lanka, okay? And how is the US supporting Adani Group in Sri Lanka, where we are facing a challenge from our adversary. So there are lots of such areas where the degree of cooperation is tremendous. Last year it was reported that US intelligence helped us to thwart a Chinese incursion in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh. It was neither denied nor acknowledged. So what I'm trying to say is that there are many areas which are very advanced. We are de facto like allies. It's just that for sensitivities and because of our history, we don't call ourselves allies. But it's going in the direction. There will be hurdles, but I think I want to end by simply reiterating what Ambassador Garcetti said. We are somewhere midway up the mountain. So I think all of us young people, which the Vice Chancellor heralded today, you will be seeing the peaks of it. But our job right now is to make sure that we believe in this relationship and nurture it carefully. And it's a pivotal one for the world, but also for us, the two countries, and for all our peoples, especially the young people. So welcome, Ambassador Garcetti. We are eager to hear you. Thank you so much.
Steps for inviting the Honorable Ambassador on the stage for his public lecture.
Well, good afternoon and namaskar to everybody, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. I know how precious all of your time is. And I'm overcome by this audience right now. Would that I weren't a speaker, but I were a mirror, so you could see your own faces, to see the hope and the brilliance, the aspirations, the diversity that is in this room. It is really breathtaking to take in. And I thank you for the honor of opening up your campus to me. First, let me thank Naveen Jindal for actually making this a reality, who's become a friend, who himself has been a leader in this country and beyond its borders. And thank you, Raj Kumar, for being such an extraordinary visionary yourself, to convince somebody like him to do this and then not to run away from it, but to actually make it happen, speaks that you are one of those rare people with an idea and the ability to make that idea a reality. So let's give him another round of applause and thank him as well. Thank you, Dean Charlia, as well, for your words, and to all the deans and to faculty members, to, of course, the staff that makes a university work. My first job after I graduated from university was teaching at a university. I was a professor at Occidental College and the University of Southern California teaching international relations. We called it diplomacy and world affairs because it sounded fancier. But we had this moment where I loved that first day, where I had a new class full of students who were as nervous as I was, certainly as a new professor. I was writing my new lectures. It wasn't like when you become a professor after many years, you can just pull out the old lectures and update them. It's a lot of work. But it's also a place where you learn as much about yourself as you hopefully teach to your students. And I always loved that, the first day, the first question I would ask, there would be the people we love in the front row, right? They raise their hands, they answer the question, so we can start a conversation. These are the eager beavers, the ones who really have something to say, who have an answer to any question that's asked, and you couldn't have class without them. But I learned in every class, basically 2, 3, 4 classes into it, I would ask a question, and suddenly I'd see a hand up that I'd never seen before. It was usually a young woman. It was usually in the back of the class. And she would speak in answering that question with such insight and thoughtfulness. We'd forgotten she was even there. And it would change the thinking of everybody in the room, including the professors, on that question that was asked. And it taught me the lesson that while I'm here, I know embodying something else, which is speaking, that the most important lesson we can learn is how to listen, how to hear each other, and how to think. Yes, you need to have the fearlessness to answer the professor's question, to answer the reporter's question, to answer the job interviewer's questions. But more often than not, we're not taught in this day and age Certainly not in hyper-competitive countries like the United States and India, where there's so many people you have to kind of shout to make yourself heard. How to sit back and to process, to hear and to listen, in order to bring thoughtfulness and even moral authority to what it is that you're doing. So let me start with that and thanking India by just allowing me to listen for the last 11 and a half months to this country that I shared with the faculty leaders that I had come to when I was first 14 years old, if you can imagine. If you look at my biography, that means in 1984, before you were alive, 1985, excuse me. My mother and my father weren't wealthy, but if they ever had extra money, they had met when they both worked for something called Pan Am Airlines. It's an airline that doesn't exist anymore. But they believed in travel. And so if they had an extra dollar, they would not put it into a bigger house or a nicer car. They'd take my sister and I on trips, not vacations. They're very intent on trips, to see and to understand the world. Now, I grew up in Los Angeles, where there's a cliche. Los Angeles is maybe the most diverse city ever assembled in the history of humanity. Over 200 languages spoken there. You can find your language, your food, your people, your religion, whatever it is in LA. And you see the face of the world on the streets of LA. But I had the gift of growing up in that kind of a city where the opposite was true too, that I would see the face of Los Angeles on the streets of the world. When I came here to Delhi for the first time, it wasn't a foreign country. Yes, there were many things that were different, but it was familiar. I knew Indians, and I know Indian culture, and I was interested in food and the religions and the history of India. It's one of the gifts of growing up in a diverse society that the more we have around us, the more we feel at home anytime, anywhere. And in that moment, India captured my heart. I returned back when I was 19 years old, the age of many of you probably in this room, when coincidentally, I decided to study Hindi and Urdu for my foreign language in school. And my college roommate, who was just randomly assigned to me, like you probably all get some random roommates here, his father became the United States ambassador to India. And he invited me to come to India. And so I came here and lived for 2 nights in the US Embassy in the ambassador's residence. And I said, I want to know even more about this country. And decided to come here my 3rd year. I was going to go to a Buddhist studies program in Bodh Gaya, but I got involved in student politics, like some of you I'm sure are. Got elected to student council, and I said, I have to serve my term, and I never came to India. But somehow India never left my heart, never left my soul. And as I studied India and came back to India, I knew I'd never live here until all of a sudden our president asked me to consider serving in this position. And I knew this was a magic moment, not just because the world is undergoing so much change. We have just lived through a pandemic that was the most heart-wrenching experience probably for all of our lifetimes, where we understand we're living through the crisis of climate change, and germs and carbon doesn't care where borders are. We share the same struggles right now to try to find peace in the world, to make sure that prosperity isn't just something at the top, but that's felt throughout a society, that women and girls find equity and are able to have as many opportunities as their colleagues who are boys and men. These things that are the challenges of today excited me. But second, this relationship between these 2 countries called to me. This was a moment which I knew that US plus India was much more than an additive relationship. It was actually India times the US. It was a multiplicative relationship, that if we can do things together, we can do things more for ourselves than we could ever imagine. And beyond the borders of our 2 countries, we could do things for the world. I talk about the 4 Ps: peace, prosperity, planet, and people. Because when I got here to India, this is traditionally the largest embassy between any 2 countries of the world. Right now, it's our 2nd largest mission in the world, only second to Mexico, which is our neighbor and obviously largest trading partner. But here in India, the United States has had a long history, whether it was in 1792, opening up our 2nd consulate in the world, was here in India, in Kolkata, or whether it was advocating against the British at the time for India's independence and joining the aspirations of Indian people to be free, whether it was in the Green Revolution and the ways that America came together with India to make sure that nobody starved post-independence and that the amazing farming revolution that happened here could be done, and then that money, because India insisted not on having aid but assistance, so paid us in rupees that we couldn't take out of the country, nor did we want to, and we gave back those rupees to establish the IITs and the IIM, some of the universities here, to give research grants to academics to see the ways we could kind of tackle the challenges of the day then. To today, where I truly believe these 4 Ps that will define our life. How do we preserve peace? How do we promote prosperity? How do we protect our planet? And how do we pursue people-to-people ties, a greater understanding between folks an ocean away from each other, or even, in our case, 2 oceans away from each other? How will we be able to do that together? Well, the US and India, it's not just that we're halfway up the mountain. To quote your External Affairs Minister, Minister Jaishankar, he said, this isn't a new peak, this is a new floor. In other words, we're never going lower than where things are, even though we're at the highest moment in our history. And I fully believe that as well. Whether it's in the people-to-people ties that we have, last year Indians became the #1 source. 1 out of 4 students in higher education in the United States coming on visas now come from India. The next highest country is about half of that. Or whether it's looking at the record trade, over $200 billion last year between each other. We're your #1 trading partner now. The ways that we're looking at technology, and that prosperity bucket is the idea, will technology, as some envision it, divide us? Will it make us less healthy and harm us? Will it misinform us? Or can India and the United States together have a vision of technology that connects us, technology that protects us, technology that detects for us disease and climate emergency, and then works so that we can use technology to human ends and not vice versa? Can we see ways in which here in India, which is roaring forward in green energy, we're working with the state of Haryana, for instance, on how you deploy a green grid, and working with states as well as the national government here to see how we can get to 100% green energy, carbon-free energy. Here in India, 40% of the potential added carbon to this world will come from this country in the next 20 years. But together, maybe we can prevent that from being additional carbon and more heat and lives lost, but instead be innovation. And this can be a manufacturer of that green energy that we need and export that from India to create greater prosperity, but to also preserve more health. You know, there's a poem that I love that was written by the poet Robert Browning. And it describes a Italian artist known as Andrea del Sarto. And, you know, it's a very long poem. It's mostly about his spirit and his art. But then there's a line in it that I always loved that said, "A man's reach must always exceed his grasp." And because we live in 2024, we should say a man or woman's reach should always exceed his or her grasp. But the idea is that human history is made up of those moments where we stretch beyond what we think we can hold. Think about that in Indian history. Think about those who fought for the freedom of India. That warrior for a free Republic of India who died before that happened, but she fought for it so that one day her children would be free. In my own country, women who said women should be able to vote and launched a movement to do that, but died before they ever could reach and hold that vote. But today their great-granddaughters are going to be voting this year to elect our president. When you look throughout history at those who have thrown off the shackles of slavery, who have pushed forward human rights, who have had an idea to start a university that nobody said was probably possible on farmland north of New Delhi. Let us all be inspired by trying to reach beyond our grasp. Because the second line of that poem, which is much less quoted, says, "After all, what is a heaven for?" Why do the US and India come together? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. We think alike. The Indian dream is the same thing as the American dream. In fact, it's more alive here some days than in the United States these days, where we're a little bit more consumed by doubt, even though our material conditions might be ranked higher. It's something that we can learn from India in this moment of optimism and hope here. We think and feel alike, so our heads are aligned increasingly when we look at the world. What are the threats? Democracies, who might not always be identical democracies, but democracies are distinctly different than dictatorships. Let us be clear about that. Where we see extremism, whether it's a dictatorship or whether it's ideological extremism, as the counter to democracies, which inherently will struggle about ideas, will have fights and conflicts, but will have a set of principles, the fifth P. Remember, after peace and prosperity, planet, and people, I would offer principles as the most important guide for all of them. And where we can find those shared principles, we now not just think alike. We want an Indo-Pacific that is free. We want the rule of law to matter. We want intellectual property to be respected. We want the rights of all people to exist. That's very different than our adversaries. But our hearts also feel alike. We don't just think alike. Americans and Indians really love each other. In fact, when I briefed our president before the Prime Minister's state visit to Washington, I said, the good news is, Mr. President, that Indians really like Americans. In fact, polls show that Indians like Americans more than Americans like Americans. And it was true. We poll higher here than we poll back in the United States. And vice versa. 1 in 4 Americans has now been treated by a doctor who was born in India. We see moving way beyond just kind of butter chicken and garlic naan. We actually have real Indian food and diverse parts of India represented throughout the United States. It used to be the joke that you couldn't succeed as a CEO in America if you were Indian. Now the joke is you can't succeed unless you are Indian in the United States, where so many of our Fortune 500 companies, from Starbucks to FedEx, from Microsoft to Google, are led by the Indian diaspora. So we think alike, we feel alike. I think the question will be, now can we move alike? If our head is aligned and our hearts are aligned, can our feet be aligned? And judging by the last year, I have very high hopes. During that state visit of your Prime Minister to Washington, and then later when the President came here of the United States for G20, which I congratulate you all on pulling off the most successful G20, another example of this multiplicative relationship. The US sometimes opens up doors that India doesn't diplomatically, and India opens up doors that the US can't open diplomatically. So when we both open those up together, we can get 100% consensus, or close to, on so many things on Earth. But when the visit to Washington happened, I was told, this is the first time I've been an ambassador, that if you can get 5 to 10 things that the two countries are agreeing on during a state visit, that's a really successful visit. We were dealing with 173 different deliverables on everything from higher education, cultural exchange, defense partnership, intelligence cooperation, trade barriers being reduced, and the list goes on and on and on. Climate, health. I'll give you an example on the planet P. Here in India, innovation that came from the United States for a dengue vaccine. There's 4 major strains of dengue. I'm sure, who's had dengue in this room? So you can see that around, and many of you have probably had some tough cases of it. There's never been a vaccine that's worked, that's had efficacy for all 4 strains. But in Maryland, a university found a way to have over 80% efficacy on all 4 strains, but the United States doesn't know how to convert that into a vaccine that actually works. And we gave it to 3 different Indian companies here, one of which is about to be in its 3rd round and final round of clinical trials. And as early as next year or a couple years from then, we will see the first dengue fever vaccine for not just India, not just for India and America, but for the world. That's an example of what happens when we come together. And if we can do that with climate, if we can do that with women's empowerment, if we can do that in our military defense for peace, if we can do that across the board, think of what this relationship can be. So I love that it says the consequential relationship of the century. That's not ambassadorial propaganda. That is hard, cold analysis. That if the 2 largest democracies in the world can bring their principles together to act on peace, our planet, prosperity, and our people, I agree with Minister Jaishankar. You ain't seen nothing yet. And after all, that is what a heaven is for. I look forward to your questions. Thank you again. Stay engaged and let us know how we can be a part of making history together. Thank you. Namaste.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency.
Good
My name is
afternoon.
Sankalp. I'm from Bhopal. So, as you have talked that we have good people-to-people ties between India and US, and we have good relations as well. But after the Baltimore accident, bridge collapse, there has been Indian racism out there in USA. And as you said that in the higher education right now, for example, China has put advisory that Chinese should not go to US. And likely Indian students will go to US universities. But when there's racism in US over the Indians, how do you think we will feel? Like,
No.
should we feel insecure, or
No.
what do you think US should do for that?
Sure.
Certain policies. Also, second question, that you said that it is really good and it's only like the peak is still yet to reach. So IMEC is the good project, and there's Iran getting involved with Israel right now, and they've also issued some warnings. So what do you think about that? Because
Sorry, I missed what you're working on. What?
IMEC, the project
Oh,
between
IMEC,
US
on
and
IMEC, sure,
India.
sorry.
So Iran is getting involved with Syria in the war in the Middle East, and it's getting insecure. So what do you think about that? Will that impact the US-India relations?
Okay, racism and Mideast peace, easy ones. Okay, so all joking aside, we all pray for peace, and we pray that it comes sooner than later, right away. I think we've been clear that the killing and the hostages, the killing needs to stop and the hostages need to be free. That is something I hope we don't have to choose sides about. Oftentimes we're like, pick a side. It's like, how can you not be on sides of both of that? And I certainly feel that way individually, and I know that the President does as well. IMEC, interestingly, hasn't slowed up at all, despite the war. When I talk to my Indian counterparts, the work that we would need to have done to prepare for one day having this trade corridor, for those who don't know what IMEC is, it's the India-Middle East corridor, which is envisaged kind of the old spice route, different than the, the old kind of Belt and Road that's happening at the north. This would be the old kind of maritime based from India to the Middle East and then into Europe route, to be able to have a modern day equivalent of that, to be able to further trade, and by the way, embed peace, hopefully. A big piece of this, I mean, some have cynically said, not cynically, some have looked at the timing of the Hamas attack and saying, maybe this was done to tank the inevitable peace that was coming between Israel and some other Middle East countries, to be able to build things like this that would secure a peace for the long haul. I don't know enough to say whether that's the case or not, but there's certainly an argument to be made. But India, Saudi Arabia, and other partners that are involved in this are continuing all the work that would have had to happen probably for 2 or 3 years anyway. So we're still incredibly excited, haven't seen a slowing down of that at all. And I think it would be a game changer for India too, to be able to have that quick access. When we have India producing the world's goods, and India already does produce a lot of the world's goods, but think of that doubling and trebling in the future, that's going to be something that ensures the economic growth at the double-digit level that you want. When it comes to racism, racism exists in every society and everywhere. I would say a couple things. One, don't get lost in the comments of social media. Never. That's actually life advice for everybody here, for a young generation. Like, post things on social media, but don't get caught in those conversations, because the faceless, nameless people who are just there, they might not even be the real people you think they are. It could be, we've seen plenty of state actors who just want to stir up social conflict, certainly in our country. And it's easier to do in a democracy. You can't do that in a country that's a dictatorship, because they control and throttle it. But racism is a reality in any country. What I would say is absolutely that 99 out of 100 or more students that come to the United States have incredibly positive, life-enriching, growing experiences, and we want more. But we have a responsibility when students come to the United States to make sure they're safe, to deal with incidents of racism. When I was in college, I headed up something called the National Student Coalition Against Harassment, that was the first clearinghouse of all the universities of America dealing with racism, sexism, homophobia on college campuses. And we took those instances and advocated to make sure that nobody ever felt alone, that they knew that, of course, overwhelmingly people don't agree with racist talk, but the thing that happens in this day and age is a comment will be out there, somebody who's a fellow racist will come on there, and it suddenly sounds like that's 99% of how people think, and they do not. Not in the United States, not here in India, I would offer nowhere in the world. So please do come, consider coming. I don't want to take away students from this amazing university. Please get as many degrees as you can here at Jindal. But those of you who are interested in coming to the United States, we absolutely welcome you to come and think it's a safe place and a welcoming place.
So my question is related to Quad and its possible expansion, as I'm researching a paper on it this semester. So since India, Japan, Australia have been active, there are other allies of the US like Vietnam and South Korea, as well as New Zealand, who have an interest in joining Quad to protect the Indo-Pacific. What are your takes on this?
Well, first of all, if we have more people that join it, we'll have to come up with a new name, because the Quad implies 4. I think there's one of the things I've learned from India, India loves more than the big multinational diplomacy, which all of us can get lost in, the UN and other things which are not as effective as they once were, and that's putting it nicely. Sometimes they don't like too much bilateral. So India really likes what I call geometric diplomacy. Triangles, quadrilaterals, maybe one day, pentagons, hexagons, octagons, the oct, I don't know. But it's really wonderful to see because India gets it right. And the Quad is a great example of this, where, yes, a message is sent when we come together, but it's not primarily a strategic or defense group. It is a group dealing with things like the pandemic when it came, the climate crisis that we face, our oceans, being able to look at ways that we can expand women's empowerment, technological advancements, et cetera. I think that that is a question for all 4 countries to consider. I don't think there's anything pending anytime soon, but what's also happening is it's being mimicked. So, for instance, the US, South Korea, and Japan coming together as a new kind of triangle that was almost unthinkable when you think about the history of Korea and Japan with each other even a few years ago. More recently with the Philippines now, and Japan, and Australia. So I think whether they come together in one shape that continues to grow or kind of multiple overlapping shapes, I do think that these are very good arrangements for sending messages to bullies or dictators or people who ignore the rule of law that there is a unified group of people. It doesn't have to be a formal alliance for us to say we share values and principles and we will act on them with a very strong message. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ram. I am
Ram.
from Mumbai and I am doing a bachelor's in political science. So you mentioned a point about technology connecting us.
Yes.
My question is, with artificial intelligence on the rise, a lot of people have a threat of losing their jobs. I don't think losing people's jobs is connecting people. What are your views on the same?
So why don't I get the second question? I'll answer them together. Go ahead.
Over the years, security has been a huge concern for us, right? On one side, we are flanked by Pakistan. On the other side, it's China. And over the years, cross-border terrorism has also been a huge issue for us. Whenever we go to UNSC, to designate people as terrorists, they get blocked. Our resolutions get blocked. Whenever we put in extradition requests, they get blocked. So from a security perspective, we are facing lots of challenges. And we have developed probably some policies for that. And I'm looking to hear how from a security perspective, we can expect cooperation between India and US.
Yeah.
And also our bid to be in the UNSC very soon. Mm-hmm. So how can we see that going forward?
Great. US and India have never cooperated more closely on security issues, whether it's at the line of actual control or whether it's been, and I would just correct one thing, there's been plenty of extradition requests that have come forward that we're working on together. And I think part of it is that we used to speak different languages, 2 different legal systems, and it'd be like, why can't you just produce? And, well, because we have a legal, it's not us, it's not the executive branch, it's a judicial branch. It's impartial judges who are going to make the judgments. And we want you to be successful. So here's the ways to do that. And so now we have teams actually working together so that Indian prosecutors, law enforcement understand the American system a lot better and vice versa so that we can have that be smooth. When it comes to, I think, military cooperation, it's unprecedented. I mean, I think about things like the sale of the GE jet engines, which are the most exquisite technologies in the world, ones we haven't even shared with some of our closest allies, which will be produced here. That was a breakthrough of this last year that for the next 20 years will ensure that whether it's indigenous or other jet fighters that come here, the next generation of jet fighters will be powered by the most powerful engines that exist. Those, I think, are not about sales. For us, that's not about making money, because there's plenty of customers around the world that want them. That's about trust, that's about a relationship, that's about a depth of working together. And there's hardly a week that goes by here where we don't have law enforcement working with one another increasingly. Yes, do we have some conflicts? Once in a while we do, and I think those are important ones to point out, to tell people where there's things you can and can't do. But at the same time, a greater understanding of each other's systems is the best way when people both want to help each other to making sure the outcomes are positive as well. When it comes to artificial intelligence, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear how all of you, we don't have enough time to hear from all of you because you're going to be the ones who really inherit this. But for me, artificial intelligence is one of the 5 pillars of what we call ICET, the Initiative on Critical Emerging Technologies. Small I, big C, big E, big T. And actually, in next week or 2, we'll be bringing together our delegations as we do probably 2 or 3 times a year to discuss what initially was 5 different areas: telecoms, quantum, space, I'm forgetting the 4th. Semiconductors, thank you. Gold star. And then, of course, artificial intelligence. That's expanded to climate and health tech as well. And artificial intelligence is a place where I do think that we should be looking at governance together, we should be looking at development of content together, and we should be looking at the values underneath that together. And quantum computing, of course, is going to be very important for that, a place where really there's a gap between the rhetoric between India and the US and the number of projects we should be doing together to help India really come up to speed on quantum and to be a co-partner with us on the quantum computing power that will really put forward AI. But you asked about jobs. To me, I think if you woke up somebody from 100 years ago and said half the jobs that you'll be doing, they'd say, huh? What are those jobs? I'm a video game designer. What's a video game? What do you mean you design video games? Like, is that a sport? No, no, you sit there in front of a screen. What's a screen? You know, human beings, the moment we think, and there are disruptions and huge shifts to labor that happen, but as soon as innovations come, there's a whole set of other jobs that open up. Where I see a real opening for India is not just with the brilliant engineers and the programmers here, where India will excel and continue to, but between there and the jobs that will be replaced. Think, I was up in Bhutan, and Bhutan's largest employer was an American company that put together photo books, the layout of photo books. You'd send your photos from a wedding, a family event, a trip, and people would actually do the layout and send it, and then you get your book. Now AI is doing 100% of those jobs. Those jobs are gone. So the very basic tech jobs that AI can replace will be disappearing, huge percentages. Even food production. I was talking to somebody who, you know, half of your meal when you order it for, you know, Zomato or something will come from probably machines making it. At some point, probably most of the food we consume will be pretty automated from the field all the way to our consumption. But at the same time, there's going to be a whole level of other jobs that open up related to that. For instance, all AI as it develops has what we call hallucinations. You know, is it human? Is it moral? Is it making mistakes? Is it saying things that are unreasonable? Is it making decisions that are wrong? And we're going to have a lot of people who can monitor and know how to prompt AI. There's going to be a huge new class of jobs that, again, 5 years ago, people would have not even understood, that I think those who are smart will be out in front of. I don't know if the balance will be you know, the same as the number of jobs today, but I'd say this one last thing. As much as we talk about India's population, and you're right, you'll be writing a very young demographic for a long time. I commend to you, New York Times did a opinion piece, editorial, excuse me, about 3 months ago about world population. It shows throughout humanity. We had a population barely going up for tens of thousands of years, and then 10,000 years ago it starts to tick up, 3,000 years ago a little bit more. In the last, you know, 400-500 years, it really goes up to here. And now we're at this place right here, where we think naturally, okay, it won't go up that fast anymore, but it'll stay up there. All projections are that in the next 150 years, it'll go up and crash back down to about 1 billion or 2 billion people on the face of the earth. So when we think about artificial intelligence, when we think about, will that be a chaotic future 150 or 200 years from now, or will it be an orderly one? Imagine New Delhi, built for 20 million people, or not quite built for 20 million, but containing 20 million people, when it's down to 2 million people. Will that be a better quality of life for people because finally there's space, or will it be chaos as people fight over it? Nobody can maintain those buildings, that infrastructure, the bodies. So I think AI, we really want to focus on how it can maintain, not just and solve the problems of today, but prepare for the ones of tomorrow.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency.
Good afternoon.
My name is Rukmini Priyadarshini Das, and I was born and raised in the northeastern state of Assam.
Yes. From Assam.
So last November, you were in our sister state of
Yes.
Arunachal Pradesh
Yep.
for the inauguration of the Hump Museum
Yep.
at Pasighat.
Yep.
So, I mean, definitely, for the paucity of time, I won't go into the history of the museum. But the fact that with the recent news of the Civil Affairs Ministry of China renaming 30 locations in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, definitely the US State Department has, come up strongly against that move and asserted that, Arunachal is and forever will be an integral part of India. But the fact that, we, like, today, currently, I'm studying in Delhi. Yeah. So most of my Arunachali brothers and sisters, we face racial discrimination across the country and the world. But the fact that the extreme jingoism of theirs, to state that Chinese PLA almost visit the villages on a daily basis, stating that, you know what, just come join hands and all of that. But the fact that we are and will always be Indians. Yes. So what can we do in an international platform that you just can't come up any day and just be like, you know what, you are a part of China. It doesn't happen like that. So what can you wish?
Well, I would say loud and clear, as I did when I went to Arunachal Pradesh. The Hump Museum, for those of you who don't know what the Hump is, the Hump was literally the mountains of the Himalayas that during World War II, Allied forces, the largest airlift before the Berlin airlift, brought supplies, weapons, fuel, planes to the Allies that were resisting, at that time, Japan, as it sought to kind of conquer Asia. And we lost about 1,600 people. We still take expeditions up there and find old planes, sometimes the bodies, not the bones at this point, of so many people up there. That is an amazing partnership between U.S. and India. What I said when we opened up the museum that day is that the world needs to respect India's borders, all of the borders, and that certainly that Arunachal Pradesh we have always recognized. It's incontestable. You can't just rename villages to suddenly change geography. And I want all Indians to know that we stand with you, that Arunachal Pradesh is I'm very proud, one of the 22 states and union territories that I've visited, and I hope to get to all 36. Full stop.